After WWII, the CIA started a program designed to use mind control against the enemies of the United States. They did this by giving unwitting test subjects, usually those who were thought to either be secret agents or expendable, large amounts of psychotropic drugs. The CIA's version of the program started in the early 1950s, sometimes with their subjects and other times with everyday citizens. The citizen subjects would be observed if they were in public, but if the experiments were being done in the testing facilities, the subjects would be mentally and physically tortured. These prisoners, as that was what they had essentially become, were given high doses of LSD among other things. Barbiturates were given to make the subjects sleep, and then high doses of amphetamines were shot into their systems to keep them awake. Many other drugs were used, such as heroin, morphine, mescaline, and sodium pentothal. And don't think it was just American citizens that were being tortured. Experiments were also conducted on Canadian and Danish citizens as well. The people behind this program built detention camps in countries such as Germany, Japan, and the Philippines, so that if they were ever found out, they would be able to escape criminal prosecution. Finally, in 1973, 20,000 documents that had been stored in the wrong place were discovered. The rest were incinerated by the CIA to cover up their crimes. Oh, and remember when I said at the beginning that the CIA's version started in the 1950s? Well, America wasn't the first to try this. Much of the early work was done in Japanese facilities and in Nazi concentration camps. And our government thought it would be a good idea to keep their work going. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. That poem is about Lizzie Borden, a spinster who was acquitted of the 1892 murder of her father and stepmother, although there was circumstantial evidence that pointed to her being the killer. The community shunned her after the trial. Today, that house is a bed and breakfast where the morbidly curious often stay to witness the strange paranormal phenomena that often take place. Pictures of the crime scene have been known to tip over and slide across the floor for no apparent reason. Voices can be heard in the walls during the night, and once, a visitor taking the tour had her phone go off after she had turned it off. She told the group it was her mother. The guide asked her if she'd like to step out and take the call. The woman shook her head and said, "She died 2 years. On a voyage in the eastern Azores, British Captain David Morehouse spotted a ship in the distance that appeared to be adrift. He changed his course to intercept the floundering vessel. He recognizes the ship as the Mary Celeste, which had set sail from New York 8 days before Captain Morehouse himself had set sail. Upon boarding, members of Morehouse's crew saw a ship that was quite seaworthy, had plenty of food and supplies, and a cargo that was secured and intact. The only thing missing was the lifeboat and the entire crew. Nobody was ever able to discover what became of those who were once aboard. Late at night on February 22, 1946, 25-year-old Jimmy Hollis and his girlfriend, Mary Jean Larey, were parked on Lover's Lane, a secluded road in Texarkana, Texas. Suddenly, a man wearing a pillowcase mask with eye holes cut into it shined a flashlight into their eyes, instructed them to get out, and hit Hollis with a gun, causing multiple skull fractures. He then sexually assaulted Larry. This was the first of 4 attacks over the course of 10 weeks that injured 3 and killed 5 people. In each attack, the victims were a couple and were killed by being shot. It was the work of a serial killer. Local, state, and federal agencies performed thorough investigations. Although an arrest was made, the suspect never went to trial for lack of evidence. The killer was never caught. Between 1974 and 1991, 10 people were murdered in the Wichita Park City area of Kansas. The police and media outlets received letters describing the method of the murders in detail and also containing taunts, strange poetry, and suggestions as to what his serial killer name should be. In the end, he was finally known as BTK, Bind, Torture, Kill. The killings stopped in 1991 and remained unsolved. People were understandably nervous and frightened during this time and wanted to beef up their security systems and safety measures. In 2004, the letters began again. This time, detectives were able to trace the source to a man named Dennis Rader, a trained electrician, church board member, and serial killer. This is unnerving enough as it is, but this final fact makes it so much worse. His job, during the time of his crimes, he worked as a security system installer for people afraid of BTK. Not all stories have to be supernatural to be scary. Sometimes you find out something about the everyday world in which we all exist that sends shivers down your spine. This horror story is one simple sentence long, and it should be the scariest thing you ever hear. Are you ready? Your world will change after you hear this. The United States currently has 6 nuclear weapons that have been lost or stolen. I have no idea where they are or who has them. Nuclear weapons are missing, 6 of them. Air Force cadet. Robert Bennett and his fiancée were parked in an open field across the road from the house of Bennett's uncle. After a few moments, they saw something in the field running toward them. As it got closer, they realized it was someone dressed in a bunny suit and wielding a hatchet. The bunny man, as he would come to be known, was screaming that they were trespassing and started to attack the car. This incident was repeated several times, all with slight variations, one reporting that the bunny man had eaten a local resident's runaway cat. Finally, there was talk of missing children and murders seemingly attributed to the bunny man. Since then, over 50 sightings of the bunny man have been reported, all at or near the Colchester Overpass, which has now been officially renamed Bunny Man Bridge. Some even swear that his ghost appears every Halloween to mark the anniversary of his death. A young girl is sound asleep in her bed. It is a quiet night, and all seems well. Then, from under the bed, emerges a horrifying clown. The video goes viral. Then, the clown is seen wandering on the roadside in the middle of the night. Before long, stickers of the clown with a phone number are seen on street signs, flyers, and the internet. People call the number and find out that the clown can be hired to scare anyone they'd like for a fee. Eventually, a documentary is made, revealing the clown to be a 65-year-old, unidentified man. But then, a person claiming to be the real Wrinkles says that the man in the documentary is his alter ego, and he, the real Wrinkles, is a performance artist, and the mystery will be explained in 2023. Maybe it's not horrifying, but it certainly is unsettling. The horrifying part is that in 2016, clown sightings began to take place. All through the US, Canada, parts of Europe, and as far as New Zealand, people began to see a solitary, evil-looking clown, and sometimes entire groups standing along the roads, near schools, outside homes, seemingly everywhere. No explanation has ever been learned about how or why this happened, and no arrests were ever made, which means they are all still out there. A writer is startled awake in the early morning hours after having a dream about his son trying to escape an evil entity in the form of a fire hose as it chases him through the halls of the hotel in which he is staying. He lights a cigarette and begins to write feverishly. By the time the cigarette has burned down, the bones of his book are set. He settles back to rest in room 217 and readies himself for another day. The hotel was the Stanley Hotel in Colorado, the writer was Stephen King, and the story became The Shining. But the story gets weird if you think about it. At the time of King's stay, the Stanley was on its last legs. Once great, but now run down. The hotel was used for the filming of The Shining, and King really hated the adaptation. So he puts together a little production company to film the book the way he wants it. In doing so, the hotel is essentially renovated in the main areas and now has notoriety as a boost. So the dream comes to King in what is rumored to be a hotel filled with spirits and hauntings. He writes a book about said hotel, a movie is made there, the place is refurbished and renewed and is saved from decay and ruin. It sort of makes you wonder if the spirits of the hotel set in motion the means to its new life. There is a murder. Then, news outlets receive a letter from the killer. The letter contains a cipher that must be solved, and the killer wants to be published. More murders happen, more letters are sent with the same cryptic ciphers and codes, and the killer's claims get more and more outrageous. Sometimes he follows through, sometimes he doesn't. Some of the letters even come with pieces of the victim's clothing attached to prove he is the actual killer. In all, there were 5 killings that could be attributed to the madman, 2 survivors, and 28 more killings believed to be the work of the killer, although he claimed to have murdered 37 people in total. If this sounds like Riddler from the Batman, you wouldn't be far off. This was the work of Zodiac, a real-life serial killer on whom Paul Dano's Riddler character was based. For over a year, this game of cat and mouse murder was played. The police were never able to learn the identity of the killer. It's 1912, and the Moore family, along with 2 sisters who were friends of the Moore children, arrived at their home. They had just spent the evening at a Children's Day celebration at their local Lutheran church, an event Mrs. Moore had helped plan. After spending some time together, they all settled down for a good night's sleep. Sometime before dawn, each of them, adults first, children after, and lastly, their 2 little guests, were bludgeoned to death by an intruder or intruders that may or may not have been hiding out in the attic of the house, waiting for them all to go to sleep. The only person who received injuries from the blade side of the axe was the father. Although there were many suspects, no arrests were ever made. The house is now a tourist attraction that gives tours and can be booked for overnight stays in one of the rooms where members of the family were slaughtered. Sleep tight.